right, everybody, we're going to get started. Hello, everyone from CritiqueMatch. We're thrilled to have everyone here for our second webinar with our pro critiquer, Jackie H. We're going to talk about how to judge in our writing contest, and Jackie's going to walk us through all of that shortly. A couple of things. First, introduction, of course. Jackie provides editing services for authors of both fiction and nonfiction. And in addition to her freelance work, she serves as a writing tutor for graduate and undergraduate students. She holds a PhD in history from Emory University, and her essays have been published by Oxford Dictionary of National Biography and Palgrave Macmillan. A couple of housekeeping items. This event will be recorded, so if you're not okay with that, feel free to remove your camera and just keep the audio. And while everyone's lines are muted, feel free to ask questions along the way using the chat function, and Jackie will answer at the end. And with that, I'll just pass it right away to Jackie.
Awesome, thank you. If you are tuning in to this webinar, my guess is that you are either a contestant or a judge in our FictionFive contest this fall. So first, I just want to say thank you. This is such a unique thing for our community. It's such an awesome community building activity, and it's just such a great way for people to get eyes on those really important first few pages and a lot of feedback on them. This is the second contest. I judged in the contest over the summer, and I will tell you, it was by far one of the highlights of what was a very strange and unusual summer. I'm sure we all experienced that. I had so much fun. It was awesome. And so thank you for volunteering to be a judge. Thank you if you volunteered to submit your entries. We're just going to talk through pretty quickly tonight just the nuts and bolts of the judging process and how to use that score sheet in the CritiqueMatch platform. So we'll talk a little bit about the steps in the process. We'll walk pretty quickly through the 5 judging criteria and the numeric scores. I'll give you a few things to remember as you move through the whole judging process. A few tips on how to make sure what you're leaving for our entrance is constructive and encouraging, and then I will open it up to any questions anyone has. So the judging process. I suspect that probably if you've come this far, most of you have already done the first couple of steps, but just in case, the first and most important thing is that you need to become partners with the contest accounts. So all of the entries will be coming to you not from the authors themselves, but from a central contest account that's run by one of our contest coordinators. If you are not partners with that account, then you're not going to be able to receive those entries. And I'm going to show you when you're searching for those contest profiles, you'll know for sure you found them by searching for contest and then looking for the awesome little FictionFive logo with each of them. And then request them as a partner. You'll be requested back, and that will give you access. That will allow our contest coordinators to send you entries. Step number 2 is that you will get those entries from the contest coordinator. So again, you're not going to be in touch directly with any of the authors themselves. All of the entries will come from those contest accounts, and they will show up in your partner work. So when you're on your main screen on the platform, you're going to look on that sort of menu bar on the left-hand side, and where it says partner work, you're going to click right there. And you'll see that you've gotten work requests from those contest coordinators through those contest accounts. That's it. So don't think that you know, you've missed something. You're not going to get any entries from the authors themselves. They're all going to come through those accounts. And the judging sheet is going to be included in the text of the entry. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So if you can imagine that this is my entry that I've received, if I had my mouse ready to go and could scroll up, what's going to be above that is the text of the entry. Is going to be those first 5 pages that are the entry. So this is right in that same text box. It's not going to be down in the feedback box. It's nothing that you have to copy and paste from somewhere else. It's embedded right there. And then to leave feedback for each of those 5 categories, you're going to leave them just like inline comments that you would leave for any of your partners. So you're going to select the text that very conveniently says select this text. You're going to select it, highlight it, and then you're going to go up to that top left-hand corner where you have your comment button with the little yellow plus sign. Click there, and then one of these blue comment boxes will pop up. That's where you're going to leave the text of your feedback. That's also where you're going to leave your numeric scores. So you type them right into those boxes and everything will be embedded right in that story. There's nothing that you need to enter extra. There's nothing that goes in that feedback box. Everything is going to be embedded right here in the story. So for each one, you'll make sure that you're leaving a numeric score from 1 to 5, and we'll look at what those scores mean just in a minute. And then you're going to leave some feedback. Leave the entrant some feedback on things that worked well, on where that score came from, on things that they did really well, or things that you think that they could improve. And then at the bottom, you're going to total up each of those scores. So this is not an overall score for the piece. What you're doing is adding each of those numbers from those 5 sections. So if I have a 4 in characterization, a 1 in pacing, a 3 in craft, I'm going to add up each of those individual numbers and put a tally at the bottom. You're also really encouraged beyond completing that score sheet and leaving feedback in those numeric scores to leave the entrants some inline comments. And we'll talk at the end. I'll give you some suggestions for things that you can leave in those inline comments to kind of differentiate them from the feedback in the score sheet. But again, the more feedback, the better for all of our authors. Just like when you're doing a partner critique, you can save that draft. So you can write notes, save it, come back to it, work on it again later, read the entry, leave a couple of notes, save it, and then come back and add more later. I'll speak from experience. If you accidentally submit it when what you meant to do was save the draft, I call that my fingers working faster than my brain. Just message your contest coordinator through that contest account. They will be happy to get you squared away. But once you're all done, you are going to submit that. It goes back to the contest coordinator, so it doesn't go directly to the author. They will do the number crunching and all of the things that need to be done to move those entries on to the next step in the judging process. So those scores 1 through 5. I won't kind of belabor this point too much because I think that the scoring guide that is going to, again, be embedded right in that text. So you'll be able to refer back to this as you're choosing your scores. I think it's super intuitive, but just as kind of a different way to frame it, 5 is ready to be published. You could imagine, for example, those characters in a book that you picked up off a bookshelf in a bookstore or from your local library. They are so polished, you could imagine reading them in a book right now. A 4 is that it's ready to go with a few tweaks. You could imagine with a few improvements that those characters or the pacing would be ready to go. 3 is, the story has a good framework, but there are details that need to be polished a bit more. There are some revisions to be made. Maybe some things need fleshing out. 2 is that, maybe there's some problems with the framework, with the story overall, but also some challenges with the details and needs for revision. And then 1 is, this would probably need a pretty fundamental overhaul before it could go to its readers. I'll also just point out to you, one of my fellow pro critiquers, I think it was Victoria, wrote a fantastic blog post about using the scoring sheet. And she breaks this down in terms of percentages, the percentage of what you think needs to be revised, which is brilliant. My brain doesn't work in numbers, but if yours does, go look it up, because I thought it was absolutely phenomenal and super helpful. So for each of those 5 categories, you're going to give a score from 1 to 5, and then you're also going to give that feedback, and we'll just walk through the categories relatively quickly. So the first one is characterization. So, you know, this is the first 5 pages of what will become a full manuscript. So does the author set the rest of that manuscript up for success in those first 5 pages? Do you get a sense of the characters' personalities? Do you understand their motivations? Can you connect to those characters? What's unique or compelling about those characters? And one of the big things to think about is this a character that you would want to follow through the rest of the book? Because again, this is a character that you're meeting in the first 5 pages. Is this a character that if you had the chance to turn the page to page 6 and keep reading about them, you find them compelling enough that you would want to keep going? Category number 2 is pacing. So again, you're going to leave a score 1 to 5 and then feedback. So some things to think about. Did the first 5 pages move too quickly, or did it move too slowly? Are you learning information about the characters organically, or are there some, you know, paragraph long info dumps? Is the plot unique, or even if it's not unique, is it a fresh perspective on a plot, even if you've seen a similar plot before? Is the main conflict clear by the time the reader finishes those first few pages? Would they be able to go into the rest of the book understanding clearly what the main conflict of this story is going to be? And then, does the sentence or paragraph structure contribute to or detract from the forward motion of the scene? So if it's supposed to be a punchy action scene and it's got really long, descriptive, languid sentences, does that hold up the pacing? Does that hold up the action? The world and the setting. So again, a score from 1 to 5 and then some feedback. Does the author immerse you in that world? Do they give you sensory details? Do you know how it looks and the textures, the smells? Is the world believable, even if it's not realistic? And that's really important for things like fantasy and sci-fi. Even if it's not a world that you recognize, it is a world that's internally consistent. It is a believable world. Do you have a sense of when and where this story takes place? And do you understand the social context for the story? So a romance in 21st century America is pretty distinct from a romance in Tudor England. And is it clear which one of those settings you're in, which world you're in? And then how does the world or setting contribute to the mood of the piece? Is it dark and dreary castles, or is it a, you know, a bright futuristic city? And how does that shape the way the story feels and where it's going? 4 is dialogue. So again, you'll give a score from 1 to 5 and then leave some feedback on the dialogue. Is it believable? Is it natural? Does the dialogue reveal stuff about the connections between characters, and does it move the plot forward? Or is it just speaking and dialogue for dialogue's sake? Are there moments where the dialogue feels expository, where it feels like the dialogue has just been included to tell readers something? And the classic is, you know, starting a sentence of dialogue with, you know that, well, if the character knew that, then probably our main character wouldn't have had to say it to them. This is maybe something better for narration. Is there too much or not enough dialogue? And then does the dialogue help the narrative move forward? Do we learn something new with each piece of dialogue? And then craft is our last one. It's all the nuts and bolts of putting together a compelling first 5 pages. So a score from 1 to 5, and then feedback. Is the point of view consistent? Does it have a strong narrative voice? If there are errors in spelling and punctuation, are they distracting from the story, or are they just something that needs to be cleaned up? Is the verb tense consistent? And if it is consistent, is it appropriate to the story? And Would you want to keep reading from here? Does this story flow? Again, if you had the chance to turn the page to page 6, is this an easy read, a read that's compelling and flows that you would just turn the page and keep going without hesitating? And then just one last thing about leaving those inline comments. So again, a few ideas to distinguish those from your feedback. Inline comments, comments that you leave right embedded in the text of the story, could be examples of things from your feedback comments. So if you say the dialogue is a little bit stiff sometimes, this is your opportunity to leave an inline comment and point it out. Here's one of those spots where I noticed the dialogue got a little bit stiff. Point out words or phrases or sentences that work really well, or that might be a little bit confusing to readers, so that they have that right in the text of the story, so that they can see how a reader's mind works as they go through those pages. Use those inline comments to give feedback on your emotional response. If you laughed or gasped or got really frustrated with a character, note that right there, because again, it helps the author understand how their readers' minds work as they move through the piece. And then ask questions or give predictions on what's going to be revealed later in the story. Because this gives your author a great sense if they're setting their story up the way they need to be. So if at the end of these 5 pages, you've got a prediction that the main character is going to kill her husband, and it turns out that's not what the story is at all, well, your author probably wants to know that so that they can work on reframing those first 5 pages. Or if that's exactly what the story is about, but the author did not intend to give it away this early, by making those predictions, you give the author a chance to reshape those first 5 pages, or know that they're already working, know that they're already meeting their ends. Just a few things to remember as the judging process goes on. First, again, the judging process is anonymous on both sides. So you receive those entries from the contest coordinators. They will not have names attached to them. You will leave feedback, and when you send it back, it goes back to the contest coordinator first. And on the other end, the author who submitted that entry will not know your name and will not necessarily know who gave them that feedback. There will be an opportunity after all of the judging is finished, if any of those authors would like to connect with one of their judges, you'll receive an email about that. And again, that's your call. If you would like to connect with that person as a critique partner, you'll be able to I'm old, I'm not on dating sites. I don't know if good is swipe left or swipe right, but you'll both have to swipe good on each other in order to be able to connect. So no one is going to be launched at you. There will be swiping involved, not literally. Okay. The judging lasts from November 1st. So I got most of my entry. I think I got all of my entries on Sunday on the 1st, and it lasts until the 22nd. So you have about 3 weeks to finish judging the entries that you've been assigned. So it gives you about 3 weeks to get that all done. If at any point you realize I'm not going to be able to get these done, or I'm not going to be able to get a few of these done before the deadline, it's okay. We all understand that stuff comes up, and you're volunteering for this. So we totally get that. Just let your contest coordinator know, either through the messaging system on the site or by emailing that email at the bottom of this screen, contest@critiquematch.com, and let them know. The sooner the better, because ideally we would like to be able to get those assigned and give the new judge as much time as possible to get it judged. Something that's new this time is that our authors have included trigger warnings at the start of their entries if they feel that you should be aware that, for example, there's violence or abuse or something that you as a reader might find triggering. If you read that trigger warning, and you will see it before you get to any of the text, and that seems like something that could be a trigger point for you, please let your contest coordinator know. We will get things swapped around. We will get that story reassigned. Don't hesitate to do that. It's really important. And one last thing about anonymity. If you happen to be reading an entry and realize you recognize it, so for example, maybe it's an entry that has been submitted by one of your critique partners and you know it or you've read it before, please let the contest coordinator know. Again, judging is supposed to be anonymous on both sides, but also we want to make sure that it is as fair as possible. So if you recognize the text that you are reading, please let someone know and we will get that reassigned to another anonymous reader. And then just very quickly, a few things to keep in mind. The policy is judge as you would like to be judged. This is such a phenomenal way for the entrants to get feedback from multiple different viewpoints, but we want to make sure that it is encouraging and it is constructive. This is a community building activity. It's a community building event. And this is a way for us to build our community's reputation out there in the world of independent authors as well. So we want the internet to be abuzz with how helpful and how constructive the critiques our entrants were. So offer constructive feedback and not just scores. Make sure that you're leaving feedback with each score, but also make sure that you're leaving those inline comments, things that the author has done well, things they might consider to improve, and make sure your scores align with your feedback. So if you're telling someone that, you know, it was wonderful, there wasn't a single typo in there, the point of view was consistent and it read really well, but you've given them a 1 or a 2 as a score, that's going to be jarring for that person. Make sure that your score matches your comments, because the comments are to help shed light on that score. Where did it come from? Make sure that what you're leaving is constructive criticism, not just criticism. So you are not responsible for proofreading any of these. Step away from the red pen. You don't have to mark up every error. Mark things that you think would be important for the author to know about these first 5 pages as they move on towards the rest of their manuscript. Again, ask questions and reread your comments. Get them written down, save the draft, take a break, and go back to them later, and make sure that you stand by each of those comments in terms of them being not just criticism, but constructive criticism. You've given a way for the author to build on what they've already done. And then remember that at the contest, you're going to receive a rating from the contest coordinator, which is awesome and super exciting and a great way to build your reputation here on the site. And you'll also receive a discount code for the next contest so that you are ready to go when the next contest rolls around, and hopefully you will have your FictionFive entry right there with everyone else's. That is what I have for the night. So I am ready for any question. Please don't ask me questions about dating sites. I really know nothing about which direction you're supposed to swipe in, but any questions about using the judging sheet?
Thanks, Jackie. That was great. I do see one question on the chat from a participant, and the question is, what if there's no dialogue? How do you rate the dialogue section then?
Oh gosh, what a good question. My take would be, the first thing to consider is, should there be? You know, is there too much? What we're talking about is now 5 straight pages of narration. So does this narration need some dialogue to break it up, or does it need some dialogue to give us more insight into the characters? Do we need dialogue so that we've got more showing than telling? But I would say, if there's no dialogue and to you that dialogue didn't seem necessary, then I don't necessarily think you need to mark an author down for that artistic choice. And so then it becomes, in my mind, to what extent would the dialogue have been helpful or necessary? If it really needed some dialogue, you know, it's a 1, and you can help talk them through that in the feedback. If, you know, the dialogue might have been good, but it flows pretty well on its own, then I don't see any reason that a 4 or 5 wouldn't be an appropriate score. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you.
Okay.
If it didn't read well because it needed some dialogue, obviously mark appropriately. Um, but if it read perfectly well and it just didn't really need it, there's no reason to like score it as 1 just because there wasn't any. So you can just take into account how the lack of dialogue fit within the story.
That was a great question.
Yeah, and I think that's all we have.
Great.
Thank you so much for explaining the judging process, Jackie. These were great tips for the judges. Have your banner here because, as a reminder, Jackie is a pro critiquer on the platform. She has fantastic ratings from clients and critique partners. So check out her profile for beta reading and critique services under the Hire Professionals section. And with that, I would like to thank everyone for their time and energy. And thank you so much, Jackie, for these great tips. And I would like to wish everyone a good night.
Thank you.